thank you for coming today, and I hope you get all your questions answered about the Institute of Holistic Nutrition today. I do actually have to carry on to the health food store after this talk, but I will hopefully have a little bit of time if you have any questions for me afterwards. I'll try to just hang around in the other room if you have any questions. So today's presentation is about genetically modified organisms, and we're going to talk about some of the problems with these and some of the solutions and some things that you can do to avoid them in your food and in the food system. So I want to start with just how it'll unfold. So we're going to define what a genetically modified organism is, if you don't know. Often referred to as GMOs, so we've kind of turned it into a word almost, the acronym into a word. We'll talk a little bit about the history, some statistics about genetically modified organisms in the food system, some pros and cons, or supposed, I like to call them supposed pros and cons of this science in our food system, some solutions, and I'll give you some references to if you want to go do further research or get more information after the presentation. I did bring some flyers from the Non-GMO project. I don't know if I brought enough, I'm sorry, but I will give you this reference at the end so you can go on their website and find everything that's in this flyer. All right, so let's talk about what is a genetically modified organism, right? Because we may have never heard of them, which is fine because they're not advertised as being in our food system, especially in Canada and North America. But essentially, these are plants or animals created through the gene splicing techniques of biotechnology. Okay, so we're taking the genetic material of one, let's say a plant, and splicing it together with another plant. Okay, so we want the trait from here in this organism, and we're going to put them together. It's sometimes called genetic engineering, or also GE. Okay, so GMO, GE, genetic engineering, genetically modified organisms. We call experimental technology because it's fairly new, where it merges DNA from different species and often creating unstable combinations of plants, animals, bacteria, viruses that cannot occur in nature naturally. And this is where sort of the big concern comes from, is that these two things would never come together in nature. So we often crossbreed things, or we try to, so for example, tomatoes, we might take want two varieties of tomato and cross-pollinate them because we want to get the traits from both that we like. Maybe the size of the tomato and the flavor, for example. We might try to cross-pollinate, and this happens naturally in nature. The issue with genetically modified organisms, and we're actually splicing together two organisms that would never meet in nature, okay? So this is just a visual of saying, okay, now that we can actually find the coding in genetic material, which is pretty amazing science, we can take it out of this organism. So let's say the famous example is they took a fish gene out of a fish and put it into a tomato, right? If you're familiar with. So you take the gene, which was to allow the tomato to grow into colder seasons, right? Because fish live in cold water. So they took this trait from the genetic material and then they splice it into the tomato. Okay, so it's often referred to as Frankenscience, right? And I always joke that with all the online dating systems in the world, you would never meet a fish and a tomato, right? You can never bring these two things together in nature unless we decided to intervene, right? So that's a fairly famous example. Luckily, the tomato didn't taste very good, and people didn't like it, and so it didn't last too long in the market. The history is that this recombinant DNA technology was made possible by the discovery of DNA, which was, again, very amazing science, right, that we have come this far in science, and the creation of the first recombinant or bacteria, right, by Arbour, Nathans, and Smith in 1973, and they actually received the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1978 for this, okay, because if we think about it just in its simple form, it is actually fairly amazing that we can do this, right? That we have figured this out in science. Unfortunately, the uses are now becoming very questionable, and they haven't been in the world long enough to really know the long-term consequences. And so the uses are in biological and medical research, production of pharmaceutical drugs, experimental medicines and gene therapy, and agriculture. And so today we're going to focus on GMOs in our food system, okay? We're the holistic nutrition school, so we'll talk about these actually being in our food, okay? This is, a 4-year university degree, right? We could, you could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. So this is very introductory, but it'll give you a fairly good understanding, hopefully by the end of the presentation. In 1975, the scientific community actually raised a red flag about the safety of this science and recommended more studies until it was deemed safe. Okay, so they're saying, yeah, we can do it, and that's amazing, but I think we need to really be careful with it. And so in 1994, there was 0 acreage of genetically modified plants on the planet, and presently we have over 200 million acres growing. So nobody listened to this raising of the red flag. So we went from nothing to over 200 million acres of crops growing on the planet fairly quickly. Okay, so the science was in the 70s, and we really introduced it in the 90s, once we were able to get the traits to actually produce properly in the seeds that we produce, that we wanted. It doesn't always work. And so here's this flounder tomato scenario cartoon. So like I said, it was the first genetically modified food, was called the FlavrSavr tomato. People just didn't like it, right? So it's interesting because we can really vote with our dollar, right? And so if we don't want things to last in any system or any, we can really vote with our dollar, and then these things sort of disappear, right? If it's not working, it's not selling, then they'll just take it off the market. So something to keep in mind in terms of solutions to this in your food system. And so what is actually genetically modified in our food system, especially in Canada and the US? And I think people often think that it's this huge long laundry list of foods, but it's actually quite short. So you might be surprised at the length of this list. So we actually grow corn, canola, soy, and sugar beet in Canada, quite a bit of it, genetically modified. And then we import cottonseed oil, papaya, some squash, zucchini, and some milk products from the States. Oh. Yeah, some sort of unusual products that you might not think. But yeah, papaya is one that they grow in Hawaii, in the United States. And so it's not a long list, but if you think about just corn, for example, there can be corn starch, corn oil, high fructose corn syrup, right? If you start looking at labels and ingredient lists, you'll start to realize that corn and soy and sugar are in a lot of our foods, right? If you go home today after the open house and start looking at some of the products in your cupboard, you'll see that corn and soy and sugar are in a lot of our foods, and not necessarily a nice fresh cob of corn, right? It's a refined ingredient that they've changed. So yeah, so the list is not that long. There's lots of seeds that are waiting to be introduced into the market. But so wheat, some people wonder if wheat it's a trial genetically modified seed right now, but it's not actually in our food system yet. And so some of the statistics on genetically modified organisms. So in 2009, 93% of soy, 93% of cotton, 86% of the corn grown in the US were genetically modified, okay? And they don't really look different, so you wouldn't know, right? And we don't have labeling laws in this continent right now, so we won't know in our food either. It's estimated that over 90% of the canola grown is genetically modified. And we grow a lot of canola in Canada. Canadian oil, canola. 80% of products on the grocery shelves, and I put a plus there because that's a really hard thing to gauge, but over 80% of the products on our grocery shelves are estimated to contain some sort of genetic modified content, okay? And that is really because corn, soy, and sugar are in a lot of our foods. And that's something we talk about here at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, is just in processed foods, right? Sort of comes down to eating more whole foods where there's no ingredient list. that these things really do end up in our foods. And there are actually 3 common allergens as well, the soy and corn especially. So there's no labeling required in Canada or the US, despite 88% of us and 94% of Americans wanting it. Okay, so the government, I think, says that, well, there'll be a fear around the food, right? Really? Funny that. So, and I would say the other 12% of us Canadians and 6% of Americans may just not know, right? Or who they polled may just not know about this in the system. I've had conversations with people before who just weren't aware of this, right? So it's important that we know what's in our food system. When something is certified organic, either the Canadian or the US, and anything imported from anywhere else will be checked if it's certified. But genetically modified organisms are prohibited in the system, from seed to product, and no additional. The problem is that now that we saw the stats of how much is growing on the planet, is cross-contamination, right? So if you're the organic farmer here, and this is the conventional farmer here, and the wind blows, right? Now it can be in your field. And in the course that I teach, we actually spend a whole day talking about this, and we talk about some of the things that ended up in court over genetically modified organisms. So a farmer has some GMO canola found in his field. He didn't buy it and he didn't want it there, but he gets sued because they're patented, right? So that's if we have time, we can go into that later, but it starts to get really, sketchy in terms of being taken to court for having something in your field that blew in there, right? The wind, you can't control Mother Nature. So we'll talk about that in a sec. So here's some of the science, right? Because people say, well, this might save the world, or this might feed the world, or if we were doing things that were actually beneficial for human beings with this science, then maybe people might get behind it. I still think we need lots of research around it, but I'll show you what a majority of the genetically modified seeds are doing for the agricultural system. So Roundup Ready seeds, okay, is it Roundup? If you're not familiar with Roundup, it's the most widely used herbicide on the planet. It's made by Monsanto. And so over 80% of all the genetically modified organisms grown worldwide are engineered, so we're engineering these seeds to be resistant to the #1 selling herbicide. Okay, does that make sense? I take the plant and I engineer it at the DNA level so that it will be resistant to the herbicide. And this means that now when I spray my field, and these farmers are not small farmers with a little 100-acre plot. We're talking thousands and thousands of acres of canola or sugar beet, where you can spray the whole field now, and the only thing that survives is your genetically modified crop. Okay, and so this was sold to farmers by saying you'll spray less, you'll use less chemical, because the plants, you can just spray liberally and you'll likely spray less. But what they're finding, and I've seen this stat go between 10 to 15 times more actual Roundup being used. So we're actually using more herbicide. So Bt is actually a natural soil bacteria. So it exists in the soil naturally, and we know that it helps plants be resistant to certain pests. Okay, so an organic farmer might actually use Bt insecticide, but it's really just a bacteria. It's kind of like releasing ladybugs or aphids into your garden to help control certain bugs, that sort of thing, right? So it's a natural soil bacteria. So the seed is actually genetically engineered to have this bacteria in the DNA. So when the bug comes along and takes a bite of the plant, the pest dies. Okay, and so the issue here is that we've genetically engineered a bacteria that would never be in the plant now into it, and then we're consuming it. And the concentration of what you would need for Bt on your field is much less than what they actually get into the plant. So now your digestive system is left with this issue of having to deal with a bacteria that they've never seen before, right? You could argue that food processing, for example, which has accelerated greatly in the last 50, 60 years, right? People used to cook more at home, whole foods, and just cook from scratch. And now we have all these processed foods that people are having a lot of digestive issues now in the world. We talk a lot about that at IHN. And is that because we have all these sort of these new foods that are so refined that our bodies don't really recognize them, right? It's not wheat anymore, it's refined wheat with sugar added and preservatives and colors and all like that, right? So same thing here, you put a bacteria into a plant that your body normally recognizes for digestion, but now you've got something that it doesn't recognize. And we know that our own gut flora, we have our own bacteria, so is it interfering with our own digestive balance and health, having this bacteria in the food? And like I said, it didn't really, it didn't work, and especially in India. And you may have heard some of the tragic stories that happened there because there's a lot of people to feed there, and it didn't work for them. The third technology I want to talk to you about is called Terminator Technology, and this is the one that's often shocking to people. So the seed is engineered to be sterile once it's grown. Okay, so historically, farmers would grow a certain portion of their field for next year's seed, right? It's a great way to save money. Sometimes you buy in your seed, but in a lot of cases, you're growing the same thing over again. And people have crossbred and hybridized seed for years and years and years to get the perfect, wheat crop or the perfect canola, whatever it is that they're growing. And so these seeds are engineered so that they are sterile. So what grows in your plant can't be planted again. It goes against nature, right? The seeds are there to be replanted. So this stops farmers from being able to save their own seed. They have to buy seed from the seed company every year now. So they're buying this Terminator seed that just doesn't reproduce, which just goes against Mother Nature. So the issue with this is what happens when this cross-pollinates with a similar species in the wild, right? Now you're going to have this Terminator seed out in sort of, whether it's other like similar plants or in other weeds, and now we have this Terminator seed outside of the fields, right? Because again, we can't control where the wind blows, where the birds land, and that sort of thing. Things that are cross-pollinating. And it's unfair because, like I said, there's a long tradition of farmers will save the seed. So these are really what the technology is being used for. It's not to improve nutrition. It's not to make any benefit to the consumer. It's really for the benefit of the companies that make the seed to sell more insecticide, right?
It's greed.
Yeah,
it's greed.
It's greed, and it's not for the benefit of humans. So Monsanto, just to their name comes up quite a bit with this topic, is because they're the largest seed company in the world. And over the last century, they have bought up all the smaller seed companies, right, under their umbrella, and now own 23% of the world's commercial seed market. This is a 2007 stat. They own seeds planted on approximately 90% of the crops acres grown worldwide. And they also sell the top-selling herbicide, which is Roundup. Okay, so they've got a nice little package there for you. Buy our seeds, buy our herbicide, and other chemicals as well, pesticides and fungicides. And so they're the 5th largest agrochemical company in the world. Okay? There's a lot of money being made in Monsanto. There are other seed companies as well that are, but the top 5 companies tend to be the top 5 in both seed and agrochemicals. So what are these claimed benefits of genetically modified organisms, right? Because like I said, the science is pretty amazing that we've been able to do this, right, in a laboratory. That's a pretty amazing feat. So the idea was that we would have better resistance to weeds, pests, and diseases, right? That's sort of a farmer's biggest challenge annually is how am I going to keep my weeds down? What pest am I going to potentially have this year? And what diseases can blow in? So the blight, the potato blight or something like that. What are my challenges this year? And one of the issues with having large agricultural land growing only one crop, so you can just drive north of here about 20-30 minutes and see, well not now, but about a month ago, corn as far as the eye can see, right? And so the problem with that is that if you do get a pest or an issue or a disease or something that ruins that crop, that's it, right? You're done. Whereas a mixed farm that has a few things on the go, if one thing fails, well, at least you have a backup with some other crops, right? So it's the idea of supporting sort of smaller operators that actually do have more than one thing on their property. Maybe we can improve the texture, the flavor, the nutritional value of this corn or tomato or strawberry or whatever it is that we're trying to genetically modify. I would argue that whole foods taste pretty good as they are. They don't really need a lot of help, right? So sweet potato, baked sweet potato tastes pretty good on its own. It's sweet, you know. The strawberry in June is a beautiful fruit that we can enjoy. You know, food in season is actually pretty delicious without even putting sauces and things on it, right? But we trying to improve on something that Mother Nature has already kind of figured out for us, right? In the class that I teach, we talk a lot about systems in nature that work perfectly well, and then we come along and sort of elbow it out of the way and say, we think we can do it better, right? But it's not working for us. It's not working. Potentially decreased use of pesticides, herbicides or fungicides, you could add to that list, but that's, like I showed with the Roundup Ready, it's not proving to work that way. Maybe we could get a longer shelf life from the food. Is that a good thing? I don't know, right? Just because the Twinkie will be around after us doesn't mean that it's a good attribute. An efficient use of land, perhaps. Now we can start planting our corn rows closer together, right, and get more out of the land. Again, is that a good thing? Not necessarily. More food produced, cheaper food, maybe, and so the big quote is, we'll feed the world, right? And if imagine you're a third world farmer and you get this sales pitch, right? Absolutely, you would want to believe in it, right? Because you need to feed your people, right? But there's, like I said, no guarantee, and a lot of these systems are failing, so they're not feeding the world. There's a lot of really amazing traditional wisdom that farmers have that has worked for centuries, right? And the population, as of I think last weekend, is now 7 billion people, apparently. And someone, I think also on the CBC, I heard a great quote that was, it's not an issue of population, it's an issue of consumption. Right? So our resources on the planet could potentially sustain the 7 billion people that are here now, but it's about us choosing how much we want to consume from the planet, right? Because the resources on the planet are finite, and so when they're gone, right? We don't make another planet, right? And if we could, that would be questionable. I wouldn't know if I would live there. Okay, so let's talk about some of the risks of genetically modified organisms, because they're already proving, even since 1994, they're already showing very ugly heads. So the instability of crops, right? If you're genetically modifying something, it doesn't necessarily grow as strong or as sturdy as its counterpart that was actually just developed in nature over many, many years. Genetic pollution, so the transfer of genes between species, right? We don't, we have it in this corn crop, in this field, we want it here, but like I keep saying, the wind blows, the birds fly, the bees will cross-pollinate, so now it ends up in other plants, and we don't know what that impact is going to have. So there'll be an instability, transfer of genes between species, or the Terminator seed making it into another plant, right? And now it's spreading. Creation of super weeds. So, like I said, there is already this issue, these weeds that are breaking combines in the prairies. And superbugs as well, right? So the more you spray a pesticide, the more the pest becomes resistant, and then next year it doesn't work for you, right? And so some people will argue, is organic possible worldwide, right? I don't know if in my lifetime it will necessarily change 100%. And it's maybe not that we obviously want to support the organic system as much as possible, but even if we could get people to just use less pesticides, right, and to spray responsibly rather than just dumping tons of these chemicals into their fields, which end up in our waterways, in our soil system, in our air, right? So just even a responsible use of these chemicals so that we can find the innovative ways to grow food organically or properly. I do think we got ourselves into this mess. I think we can also get ourselves out, right? So there's this is the doomsday talk. And once these genes are changed, they can't be changed back. So you don't take, once it's out there, it's out there. Right? You can't go back and say, oh, no, we made a mistake. Because once they're out, the genes are changed, they're changed forever. And so here's a little example of what could happen with a freezer.
Oh, yeah.
If a weed can break a combine, it's pretty strong. If you've ever seen those big machines going out and harvesting the corn in the field, that's a pretty strong weed. Okay, so health risks. When we change the, when we splice genes together, we're changing the proteins in an organism. And allergens, so when we have an allergic reaction to something, it's from the protein, it's an immune response to the proteins in a food. So if we alter the protein, so for example, there's a trial right now where they're splicing a nut trait from a nut into a fruit. And I can't remember to the fruit or the nut, but they're slicing it into the food. So if you have a nut allergy, and the food's not labeled, you'll never know why you're having a reaction, right? So sometimes we'll eat a food, or you'll get very sick from something, and even just in our processed food system, it's hard to distinguish what it was that made you sick. Because now when we look at the ingredient list, on foods, there's 57 things in our cereal, right? What made me sick? So now it's at a genetic level, and it's not labeled. So you could eat something and feel very sick, and this happened in the States with corn tortillas, right? Because the sweet corn is not genetically modified as of yet. It's mostly cattle corn. So some cattle corn got mixed into some corn for human consumption, and some people got really, really sick for it. So they were recalling all these corn products off of the shelf because a woman got very, very sick from it, and they somehow were able to make this correlation and find out that this contamination had happened at the production level. So. Increased risk of cancer. So in some studies, they're showing mice and rats that are fed genetically modified seeds have lesions in their intestinal tracts that they can lead to cancer. So we're altering the DNA, right? And we know that cancer starts from abnormal cells. Ingesting foods that contain these herbicides, so the Roundup or the BT at a molecular level, right? That's going to be hard for our bodies to figure out so quickly, right? Food's changing really fast, and there's no wonder there's so many digestive issues in the world of things that are available for us to eat. And so, some pretty serious health risks, and with no labeling, no one's ever really going to be able to track it, right? So the organic system prohibits the use of genetically modified organisms throughout the whole system. However, we're starting to see now that when we do test organic foods, regular foods, that there's contamination. And that's strictly because the wind blows, right? So there's going to be this small, now we're at a state where there is a very small percentage in all food systems because it's all grown near each other. Did you have a second question? No. Okay. So with organic, yes, it's prohibited. And so that's a label you can look for. The problem with organic for a lot of people is, can they afford to buy everything organic, right? Stage of the game, it's a more expensive system. The third issue is that these seeds are patented, right? So who gives these companies the right to patent nature? Right? Yes, they did do the splicing and create the new seed, but for years and years and years, you were not able to patent anything from nature, seeds. And then in one court case, I think it was a bacteria that was able to be patented because they were able to influence it in the laboratory. That opened the door for now all for seeds to be patented. So we're trademarking nature. We're trademarking Mother Nature's creations. And that is an issue because the more seeds you own and trademark, you start to control the food system, right? Loss of seeds, seed varieties, and biodiversity, right? We already have this regardless of genetically modified organisms. There's 7,000 varieties of apples at one point on the planet. we've lost 6,000 of them. Extinction, right? And if you look in the grocery store, we really only eat about 6 or 7 of them, right? There's a yellow one, there's a green one, there's a couple of red ones, right? This time of year, you might get a few bonus apples, but the potato, for example, we grow 85% of the potatoes we grow are russet Burbank because they make a really good fry. Right? Where there were, I believe, 2,000 different varieties of potatoes at one point on the planet. So the food system has been narrowed down just for convenience, right? Because you get the right potato to make the right potato french fry. Let's just grow as many of those as possible. So we're losing a lot of variety anyway, but now when companies are trademarking seeds and sort of limiting what's available to us, then we're losing a lot of variety. Okay? And there's people, we'll talk about solutions at the end so you can all feel a little bit better about this. There are people that are saving seeds and trying to avoid the loss of some of these beautiful varieties. And for some good reason, certain varieties make it into the food system because they travel well, right? Or we read a book in my course called The End of Food, and the premise of the book is that the author found a tomato in his kitchen that just never ripened. None of them ripened. He ate it, it didn't taste like a tomato. He felt it, it didn't feel like a tomato. So he threw it against the wall, and then it bounced back at him, and he was like, so this is how he wrote a book, right? It's amazing where book ideas come out. He's like, I'm going to research the food industry because what's going on that this tomato doesn't taste like a tomato? So he actually interviews people that work in the fresh food market and in the fresh tomato market, and then the processing, just ketchup, sauces. And in their list of what they look for in the variety of a tomato, can you guess the 2 things that didn't even make it? So flavor, yeah, and nutrition. So when they're looking for a tomato variety, they want it to travel well, they want the skin to be thick so it can handle the machinery, they want it to have good solids so it makes a good tomato, they want them to all grow to the same size, they want them to look the same, right? So anyway, so food, nutrition and flavor never make it into the list of processed food. We're very fortunate in Southern Ontario and in Canada really to have some fairly innovative farmers that are getting away from the system. But they are on a smaller scale, right? So they're not necessarily doing large scale. So the heirloom seeds that he's speaking of are some of these traditional varieties, some very unique flavors. Tomatoes are a great example. If you've ever seen pictures of like yellow, white, black, purple, blue, and then red tomatoes. Or carrots, right? If you show someone a purple carrot. So yes, there's definitely people who are growing these foods. The farmers markets are a great place to find these people and support them. A lot of restaurants in Toronto are now supporting the local farmer. They have a direct connection to the farmer. There's no middle person where they just get their food directly. Sometimes just what's in season. And absolutely. The issue with the heirloom tomato, I know you're talking about all heirlooms, the heirloom tomato is it doesn't travel well, right? If you've seen a beautiful heirloom tomato, very thin skin, they don't travel well. So that would be why they wouldn't necessarily make it to the large corporate food system. And then fifth, what happens to local economy when these genetically modified crops fail us, right? And they're already starting to do that. Who's going to be on the other side to save it? And it's these people that we're talking about that will have food still growing efficiently that will probably be the ones that we go to. And like I said, we've gotten ourselves into this mess, so I truly believe that we should be able to get ourselves out of it. We just have to start doing it, today. Yeah, so we'll talk about some of the people that we can actually go to get some of the solutions. So in my class, because it's nutrition and environment, we talk about a lot of heavy topics, right? Usually by class 3, people come in. So I really do try with every class to end with solutions, right? Because there's got to be hope, and there has to be there are solutions. We just have to get behind them, right? And it often comes to money. We have to get behind the systems that are working, right? So what I tell all my students, and I have to remind myself, is we just need to speak up, right? So now is a very perfect time, an example of people in the world speaking up, right? We've got people occupying every city, every financial district in the world, telling people we need change, right?
And we're Canadian, and so we're polite. And we like to sit back and we like to just say, oh, it's okay. I'm sure they're doing the right thing for me. But we're starting to realize that's not true. And it's okay to speak up. It's okay to get a little riled up about something. You can even get angry. You can even say you're angry about it and tell your government what you really want, right? And this is genetically modified organisms and everything else, right? And so, I mean, even in Canada, it's appalling to me our voting rate, right? People just don't get it. People don't believe in it anymore. They just don't get out to vote. They don't see it. So we need to tell the government that we want our food labeled. This is really important to me. So, and the more they hear it, the more they're more likely to change it. I heard that President Obama has it sort of somewhere on an agenda. I don't know if it's on this one or this one, but he has alluded to the idea of labeling food. Engaging conversation with your friends. So for example, I had a dinner party and my friend had never even heard of this, right? And so you don't have to be doomsday friend, right? You'll never get invited anywhere again. But telling people that this is there, wouldn't you want to know about it? Or if you have a friend who's got a child with severe allergies and they can't get to the bottom of it, isn't this information that maybe they should know about, right? Writing letters to food companies that you support, right? So we tend to buy a lot of the same things, and just say to them, tell me about the GMO content of your product. Do you know the GMO content of your product? Because it's really important to me, and I might actually change products if you don't answer my question, right? Because they don't have to label it right now. Like I said, if we don't put our money behind something, then it will come off the market, or we might get some labeling. And so, interesting example, concerned consumers in Europe were able to get major companies to commit to eliminate GMOs within 1 week. It was done with only a small percentage of the overall population. Businesses do not want to lose even a portion of their customer base, right? And one of my students was saying, for every letter you write, like physical letter, not an email, there's a statistic that says there's 3,000 people that believe that they just didn't write the letter, right? So every letter that arrives on a politician or a food company's desk, there's probably potentially 3,000 people with the same thought, right? So maybe everybody can go home and write a letter today to somebody. But we really can vote with our pocketbook, right? That's one place we do have some control. So, as we brought up a couple of times already, the Canadian and the US organic regulations prohibit the use of genetically modified organisms. So if all you do for, want to get started at least, eliminating this from your kitchen, you can at least find this label. Is everybody familiar with the Canadian label? Yeah. Okay, so this was new in 2009. They tidied up our organic system. It's actually very solid, something I believe we need to support now. It would be nice to eventually just have where food is food and doesn't need to be labeled organic, but right now we need this system because we need to distinguish. And what's great is that the USDA organic label is equivalent to ours, so anything with the USDA organic label is the same as ours, and that's great for us because 80% of our organic products come from the States. So we'd have a lot less choice if we didn't have this. So Non-GMO project came about, they're out of the States, and they've created this symbol, right here, that companies actually themselves, they pay for a verification that their product is actually free of genetically modified organisms. And even some of the organic products are doing this because they've realized that we need a label that people are going to start to see more frequently, right? So this is what the Canadian and American government should be doing for us, right? And they're doing the work of the government right now until that is taken over. So this is another label you can look for, and you can go on their website and you can see some of the companies that they work with. There's some that you'll be familiar with. So this is a label that you can look for as well. And like I said, you'll see it on some products that are also organic. So just because they believe that we need more information. The other references that I've used to put this whole presentation together, and ones I go to quite often, so the Canadian Biotech Action Network, also known as CBAN, that's our Canadian action group that is looking out for us. And you can get on their newsletter and just get the information. They're really good at sending you links to letters to send to, like, who do I need to talk to about the potential of alfalfa, which is the next upcoming genetically modified food that could end up in our food system. So they have it all nicely figured out for you. The agricultural minister, all the people that you need to contact, and they have nice email links so you can send letters. Like I said, a written letter has a bit more impact, but at least we can do this from our desk. The Non-GMO project, like I said, great organization, getting the word out. And lots of educational material in there as well. So if you wanted to do a workshop, or if you're a teacher and you want to talk to students about this. The Institute for Responsible Technology is headed by Jeffrey Smith. So he wrote the book Seeds of Deception. And he's doing all kinds of education for us about this, right? So if you wanted to put together like a little action group in your neighborhood, he's got all the resources on his website, how to get people together, what information to tell them. He speaks at the Total Health Show, these health shows that come to Toronto. He's at a lot of them, so if you ever wanted to go and just hear him speak, he does a really good job of sort of summarizing, similar to what I'm doing today, but with a little bit more detail. He's got some great presentations. Jeffrey Smith, Jeff Chalk. Smith. And he's doing some great work for us just to have the information. I got a lot of the statistics and stuff off of this website. Seeds of diversity, so in sort of response to your question about heirloom seeds and varieties and just saving seed, this is a worldwide organization that actually gathers in community centers where people can come together and share their seeds. So if you're growing a really special bean in your backyard and you're saving some of those seeds, you can package them up and you can go to, they're called CD Sundays and CD Saturdays. And you can just meet people that are, and get new varieties for people, right? It's like a bit of a seed exchange, but it's also people who are, saving these varieties so that they don't go missing. So there are people out there definitely looking out for the loss of variety. The Future of Food is a great movie. There's so many food movies out now. Food Inc. It's like very popular right now. So but Future of Food really goes into the legal side of what has happened to farmers in terms of being sued for finding Monsanto seeds in their fields when they didn't want them there. Right? So Hershey Smizer is a very famous farmer who was sued, and he decided where other farmers understandably just kind of gave in and paid the fine. He and his wife decided to stand up and say, no way, right? We need these people that are willing to stand up and say, no way, like the Michael Schmidts of the world and the Hershey Smizers of the world, right? And he suffered greatly. It's a really sad segment of the movie to have to watch. But he's a hero now, right, in the farming industry, and a lot of farmers are now fighting back and winning, right? So you need that first person to get. The really sad part of that is that Hershey Smizer and his wife created a seed variety of their canola for like decades, and they had to burn it all because it could have been contaminated, and they didn't want to find the next year that they were in a position where their fields were contaminated again with genetically modified seeds. So really, really tragic, sad stuff for people who are working really hard and to feed us, right? Which is pretty important. It was in the 90s that this was all happening, and farmers just sort of one after another were getting this phone calls or letters from Monsanto saying, we did a sample of your field, we found our seed on it, and we know you don't have a license with us, because it's patented, right? So you have to sign an agreement with them, say, I'm growing your seed, and I'm going to use your herbicide, and now I have a business agreement with you, as opposed to just going and buying the seed. You're so if you don't have a license with them and the seeds in your field, what's going on? So, which is part of the reason why I think the creation of the Terminator seed, you have to come back to us next year. Yes?
It's for treating that field.
Absolutely. You're saying who gives the right to go onto your field? That's trespassing. Yeah. Really, really sketchy activity happening back then. And like I said, people were afraid, right? This multi-billion-dollar company is standing at your doorstep, right? And you're a farmer. We know that 50% of Canadian farmers don't make money, right? Every year. Somebody works off farm and on farm, just to keep things alive, right? Because people are in huge debt for trying to grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's not working. So when you're already in the red and you're about to be sued, of course you're going to say, okay, I'll pay this. It was a small fine, or we'll go to court for years and years and years, and everyone knows what that costs, right? So Percy Schmeiser got, I think, a lot of people behind him to support him, so he could do that. He just wrote a book too. He really is like the farming hero now. But yeah, and we do need to speak up, right? Again, like I say, we're the nice polite Canadians. No, sorry. So those are my references for you. If you want to go further, I think sometimes things resonate with you and you're like, I want to save seeds, so there's something there for you. Or I want to know more about this labeling system, so there's some references there for you. Like I said, we talk about this in the course that I teach. Yeah, so that's the presentation. Does anybody have any questions?